Well, it's nice to know that Jose cried practicing because I did too, but I thought it was just because I was pregnant. I know that everyone has a list of thank yous and memories a mile long, so it's a privilege to be able to share a few of mine. And I couldn't begin talking about my time at Westminster without mentioning my guy. Of course, I did not come to seminary to find a husband. There are much simpler ways to do that. But Ari, my beloved co-heir, I am so grateful that the Lord saw fit to bring us together during this season, to partner us in the work and the good work that he has prepared for us to do, not least of which has been finishing seminary. So thank you for making sure I was never late to an 8 a.m. class with Dr. Van Drunen, for underlining all of our Berkhoff readings, and for explaining Kingdom Prologue to me. I am better because of you, and so is my GPA. I'd like to thank President Kim. Before I came here, I had a career as a sports reporter, so I'm not unaccustomed to being the lone woman in a mostly male-dominated field. But I have to say, I have always felt welcomed at WestCal, valued not just as a sister in Christ, but as a student, scholar, and theologian. I know, President Kim, that this environment of welcome, of sharpening and softening one another, begins with you, that you set the pace. It has been such a privilege to study here, and I want you to know that I'm deeply grateful. I'd like to thank Mrs. Van Drunen. We should all thank Mrs. Van Drunen. She was the first person who made me feel like I belonged on this campus. And on behalf of probably every woman who has come to study at Westminster, I'd like to thank her for investing in us. Her mentorship and her friendship have meant a great deal. Dr. Van Drunen and Dr. Vanny, our resident Dutch bros, you bore the brunt of my hand raising here. Thank you for your patience. I came to seminary in part to learn the whys behind the whats that I believe. And in your classes, you helped me wrestle through tough texts and difficult doctrine. I feel so much more equipped in what I believe and assured of my faith. So thank you for your faithful instruction. Dr. Pickard, Dr. Briones, you joined our class at the 11th hour. We had so little time with you, and yet it didn't stop you from investing in us so richly. Thank you for your open doors. I know that future classes here are in really good hands. He's not here to enjoy these accolades, but I'd like to thank Dr. Nick Brennan, by whose standard of time management I was never late for class. I'd like to thank him especially for something he said to us in Gospels and Acts, that there is something about the cross that says to the world that God does not delight in the death of sinners, and for reminding us in Greek 4 that death is wrong, it's not natural, and it is right for the Christian to be deeply grieved by it. These words were a balm to a hurting heart. Standing here now, I feel like Naomi, finishing my time at seminary so full, but I came here empty. 2 weeks before I started classes here in 2020, my family was struck by the first of what would be a series of tragedies that would unfold over the next few years. I know I'm not alone in feeling the weight of the curse, the absurdity of this life under the sun, that many of you too have held in your hands, the shattered pieces of families broken by sin and by circumstance, have tasted the bitter sting of loss, change, and disappointed hopes. As creation groans to be remade, we watch our bodies crumble and fail us. Some of you know the ache of empty arms, the shadows of anxiety and depression. Some of you have watched those you love turn from the Lord and into a dark world that does not know him. And who in this room will not one day have to say a final goodbye to everyone you know. My dear classmates, it's into this context that we are being sent out to people whom Dr. Barry calls sinners, saints, and sufferers. And though we come to them with a cosmic hope of a victory that has already been accomplished, we bring it to people living in the not yet. And we are called to mourn with them. In light of that, I have a few more thank yous. Dr. Clark, when I was mourning the loss of a family member, you were so gracious to me, inside and outside of class. I may not remember any of my flashcards, but I will never forget how tenderly you validated my grief. Thank you. Dr. Bittner, you met me in the middle of a hard season, and not just because I was desperately trying to test out of Greek 1. You couldn't have known it then, but your kind words and your patient conduct toward me were a breath of air at a time when I felt mostly underwater. Then, and in the years that have followed, you have modeled Christ-like gentle and lowliness, and I have learned much more than Greek from you. Dr. Barry, thank you for letting me cry in your office. Thank you for stepping into the low places with me and Ari. Dr. Estelle, thank you for having me on belay. And last but not least, our dear Dean of Students, the Reverend Chuck Tedrick. Chuck, I don't think I would be here without you. And I know that you would say that you were just doing your job, that it was a pleasure that you are with us and for us. But you have to know that it made all the difference to me. Brothers and sisters, it is to this kind of humble, faithful service that we should aspire. May our greatest service to God's kingdom be that we loved his people well, that we sat with them in their ashes, bringing to them the comfort of his gospel and the hope of his promises. It's been a pleasure taking classes with you, sharing meals with you, and if our paths don't cross again after graduation, know that we will be praying for you, with our eyes toward the eschaton, awaiting the great day when Christ comes for his bride, when the church triumphant shall be the church at rest, and God himself will wipe away every tear. Thank you.